Freddy Villano here with Scott Thunes from the Zappa Band. And thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
I want to start out with just a little bit about how this iteration of the Zappa Band came to be, and how you got involved with it for this tour in particular. Maybe you can shed a little bit of background on that, because I know it's different members from different eras, it seems like.
Doesn't matter. The start very strongly was Amit needing to put a band together for the hologram tour in 2019. I do not know all of his mental machinations. That's not my job to discern, but my own understanding is that without some veterans, this would just be Vegas or whatever. To whatever degree he understood, that was a very important part. As many veterans as possible could we get. Now, Gail, of course, had a large, between Gail and Frank together over history, they had a large number of persona non grata musicians, people who would never be a part of the family anymore. And to whatever degree, I have done my best to stay in contact even after I got fired from the Dweezil Band, which meant that I missed the couple of years leading up to Frank dying, which I'm still rather sore about.
Okay.
After that, I'm friends with Gail. I came down to Los Angeles to see her the week before she died. We have been best friends forever. So Amit, who I've known since he was 6, obviously would want me. I kind of am generally a good enough musician. I'm not under prepared for most of the music. There's a lot of stuff I can do. I've got my talents. Frank understood that. Some stuff I can't do, but for the most part I can. So that was pretty much a gimme. And for whatever reason and how he was able to get in touch with people, Mike is obviously available. Mike Keneally is obviously available for any Zappa related shenanigans. He's very amenable. Everybody loves him. He can play a million different things. He was so important and useful to us in the '88 tour. It just is, that's just, if we can get Mike, and he's the nicest guy on the face of the planet, was always in Gail and Frank's good graces. Never had to worry about that.
Right.
And as far as singers go, he's done some leads, but I mean, as far as the classic voice of Frank, you couldn't get any more classic than Ray White. So having him in was obviously kind of like without Ray, what are we doing? That's just my personal feelings about his particular voice. It's my favorite voice in the world besides my daughter's, and of course my wife's.
Yeah.
And then of course Robert Martin, who has always had the Mike Keneally-esque can do anything level of expertise. He's soulful and he can play the classical music. And so between us 4, that was not only rather easy to put together. We're all rather amenable, all said yes immediately. This is going to be awesome. But as far as drummers go, I don't know at what point questions were asked or who was involved. But, most people don't really want to go out on a Zappa tour who are professional musicians. So for whatever reason, my friend Joe, who kicks major ass in the drum department, was fairly obvious. He's, Gail's right-hand man musically for a million years. And so that was fairly obvious. Ed Mann, obviously I'm leaving him out, which is rather unfortunate for the conversation, is that at the time had apologized to Frank and myself for the shenanigans that went on in the '88 tour that caused so much dissent and distress, which is another story for another time. But basically, it's really great to have Ed in that organization because he is an amazing mallet player. He understands textures of percussion instruments. For whatever reason, that worked out, and then it didn't work out. But for that particular organization, it was great to have him there. When we decided that we were having so much fun playing, it wasn't going to work out with Ed for a number of different reasons. And so we brought Jamie Kime in, who is a veteran of Frank's music. And of course, Zappa played Zappa for 6 years. And he's an incredibly awesome addition. I would, of course, love to have continued with Ed if that were possible, but it wasn't. And so that's the general overview. We continue to want to play with each other. And so we find ourselves at the Baked Potato in Los Angeles 3 or 4 times a year. Very sexy. Yeah. This tour that's coming up is just a very odd extension of all of that. Crossing your fingers, hoping that we might find a place on the world stage. Having our booking agent also, the guy who booked the hologram tour also books King Crimson, so that when they were going out, it was fairly obvious that that might be some kind of symbiotic synchronization. And at the time, it worked out insanely ridiculously well. So we were obviously available for a touring ensemble type of a thing. And at one point he said, do you guys want to continue doing this? I've got to get, the ball rolling. And so he got the ball rolling, and 2 weeks is not, in terms of longevity or what is possible. I don't think 2 weeks is all that much, but it's something. And it's the East Coast, and it's, there's a lot of cities in a small distance, so you can do a lot more than California, say, which is very sad because most of the West Coast people don't get to hear us. Anyway, so that's really why we're doing this. It's just serendipity.
Yeah. Well, you picked the best time of year to probably do the Northeast, number one.
The timing was perfect.
And, in terms of sustainability, 2 weeks is probably pretty reasonable to go out, and do something and maximize your time in that way. Like,
sure, but it also means that maybe possibly we could do it again. It's not a big deal. I don't know what's going to happen. Anything is possible, but the fact that has kind of taken that for the year, we haven't thought about doing anything else like that. Who knows what's going to happen, but I'm very happy that we've got what it is. I am not the biggest touring person in the world. I've never really enjoyed it. I absolutely love being here with my wife. I kind of also like playing music. I also like airplanes. I also don't mind tour buses. I also like playing gigs. I'm not in it for the money. I'd much rather stay home. But if I can't stay home, I'd rather go out with these guys.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. I'm in agreement. I see you're playing, I think from some of the videos, it looks like you're playing a P bass live.
I have since 1984 been very lucky to own and operate a 1965 P bass that I bought from an ex-girlfriend. When I was with Frank in 81 and 82, my first 2 years, he handed me these Carvin basses. He figured I don't really, he knew I had a 1965 jazz bass, but that's kind of like, vintage instrument. Yeah. Can you tour with it? I don't know exactly if that's going to be my sound or anything, but he said, I've got these two instruments. I want you to go out with the Carvins. They're exactly the same. We'll put the same strings on them. And then if you break a string, because I'm recording every show, it won't mess with my recording paradigm too much. And over the course of the year, my tech and I experimented with so many strings. Sometimes I'd have 4 different brands of strings on one at a time. And so there really wasn't the tonal consistency that I was hoping to. When I found this bass, I said, Frank, can I use the 65 P as my main and my 65 jazz as my backup? For some reason, he said yes. And so I took that out in 84 and kept it as my main in 88. The people were using 5 strings more and more. And so when I had gone out on the road with Dweezil between 84 and 88, recorded with him, the Jackson people gave me a 5-string, and I was using that for a couple of the tunes. So it's not like my favorite instrument in the world, but that's the 65P is my baby. And I have said 1,000 times, if the pickups were to die or something happened to that bass, I would quit bass. That would just be no reason to continue on, because it's like every other instrument. I kind of wish I was playing my other instrument. And if I can't have that, then I might as well just stay home.
Got it. What are you using for amps? I couldn't make out the amps behind you.
Also a very funny and long story that has been added to just this very week, because I'm prepping for the tour and I need to make sure I have my equipment. I'm not, at this particular point in time, I'm not really as professional musician as would require an endorsement, but because of personal connections, I am really good friends with the person who runs Ashdown. And before that, he ran Trace Elliott. And so when I was out with Steve Vai and I was borrowing equipment to play in Europe, the last rig I blew up like 4 amps. It was really fun. I really enjoy doing that. The last rig I liked so much. They let me keep it. It was very nice of them. And so that was my kind of, I came out tour from 88 and decided to quit music. And so it sat around for millions of years. When I started back up again, I noticed that one of my speakers was blown, and I had asked Mark if he would help me out, figure out what the speaker was. And he said, why don't I just give you a new rig? I run Ashton and just give you a brand new rig. And for whatever reason, what I was used to, that rig wasn't working for me. And I went back to the old Trace Elliott rig until it died. Funny thing is that when I was playing with my friend Frank Goodman in San Anselmo back in 81 and 82 and 83, so in the interim period between the first foray with Frank, foray with Frank. Before that, I was playing with Marin County musicians, and afterwards, and I was playing with this guy who ended up working for Mesa Boogie for a while, and he sold me for $150 their prototype D180.
Wow.
And D180 is famous for Cliff, I can't remember his last name, Cliff Burton from Metallica, touring with two of them.
Okay.
And so that was kind of like this, it's got 6L6s, it's this giant monster, and I could never figure out how to use it. I never understood how it worked or what the mechanics of it was. I just knew that if I plugged into the first channel, it just seemed underpowered. It was super heavy and I could never get it to work. So I lent it to a bunch of people for a bunch of years. And when I didn't have an amp, I asked for it back. And I took it up to Mesa Boogie to have it looked at, to clean the pots and all that kind of stuff, see if the tubes were okay. And they said, so you know how to use this thing? I said, no, I don't have the fucking first clue how I plug into one. It sounds like shit. That's the guitar channel. What are you talking about? You got to plug it into two, turn the master all the way up, and then use two. Is it like, what? What the hell are you talking about? So once I've got the instructions, you can find them online. Now that I know how to use it, that's kind of my go-to amp. I got it for $150 in 1982. It's serial number D001. It's absolutely, I don't know if I would be able to sell it to a Metallica fan, but the point is I absolutely love this thing. And so I've been using it. It's basically a free amplifier, and it, will never die. It's absolutely rock solid. Funny thing is, a couple of years ago, the school I work for that gets donations from people got donated its big brother, the 400 plus, which has 12 6L6s.
Yeah, that one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so it's its big brother, and the one that everybody's been using for a million years. I got a rig that had that and two road ready 212 and a single 15 case. So that's kind of like, I can mix and match those two amps. If I bring one along, I can use one as a backup. And so I don't really care which one I go out with. I can only turn them up to about 2 before people start getting mad at me. So the funny thing was, I've always been a 410 guy, and I was thinking maybe I was going to get a 610 cabinet. I was kind of expand my range. I don't want SVT. I don't like the way they sound. I don't really need 810s. Although if I was in an arena band, I would probably enjoy that sound. And I'm getting a better sound on my SVT backlines than I normally do. So I don't really care so much. I'm not really a tone purist because my bass does everything for me.
Right.
But the 210 road ready case, I didn't have any room for any other equipment except that. I was very lucky to have this piece of equipment handed to me, because I don't know what I would have done. There was literally no room for what I normally would use. And it filled up the room fantastically. I got my tone out of it, and the front of house sound guy said it was one of the best tones he's ever heard in his entire life. Wow. So that's pretty cool, except that I blew one of the speakers the other day. So yesterday I've been working in the garage and trying to clean it up for the wife and I. And one of the things is getting my amp situation together, because we have gigs this weekend in Southern California. Yeah, we're playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Friday, and we're playing at the Grand in Escondido, which is close to San Diego, on Sunday. And so we have to deliver all of our equipment that's getting sent to the East Coast to the rehearsal place Friday morning. So we have to get together 2 full, completely useful rigs, so that we can play 2 gigs with one this weekend and have the other one sent to the East Coast for our upcoming gig. Wow. So I have to get 2 amps together, which I'm not really used to. So everything's working so far, but cross your fingers, we'll see what happens. So that's my expectation for this year. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm hoping to see you guys on the first show on June 12th at Center for the Arts. I certainly hope to see you there. In my area. Let's go back. Let me backtrack for a second and just ask you about first joining Frank Zappa's band, and for the uninitiated, how you ended up
playing with him and to begin with, which leads to this point?
Okay. My history with Frank was that I had an older brother, and most people would probably say that. My older brother, Derek, who was 2 years older than I was, he started playing guitar after I kind of intimated that I wanted to. He kind of stole the idea from me. And then by the time he was, 10 or 11 or 12, I decided that I was going to, he decided I should play with him. So my mom was the music department secretary at our local junior college, College of Marin. And she said she knew some hippies that she could get a bass from. And so she bought one for $50. And 10-year-old Scott learned some Beatles tunes and the Batman theme with his older brother, Derek. And we played them for our soon-to-be divorced parents. And, we smiled at each other like the Beatles did on camera. It was he had his whole vision of what a band was supposed to look like. And then I quit. And then I kind of picked it up again. And by the time I kind of picked it up again, when I was 12, I had spent enough time practicing my scales, which was really weird, like a 10-year-old person practicing his scales on the bass. I honestly didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I had to do something. And so I was doing the mechanics of playing. And by the time I was 12 or 13, my brother was in another band, and he had other musicians that he was playing with, his other bass player, and I became bass bros and learned increased our technology thanks to Jack Bruce from Cream. And I was listening to Yes and John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. And so that's how my ear said I needed to put that stuff into my hands. So I increased my knowledge. One of those bands that my brother turned me on to at that time, obviously, was Frank Zappa. And so I got very lucky to have my sonic world expanded beyond just bass playing. So I was listening to Led Zeppelin for the texture and the heaviness and the bass playing, but I listened to Frank Zappa's third album, We're Only in It for the Money, for the expansive musical education and excitements. There was orchestral music. There was every possible different flavor of rock music. There were strange vocals. There were strange sound effects, everything that you could possibly want in an album. In fact, I still tell everybody, hey, it's my favorite album. If you're going to start with Frank Zappa, you might as well go full maximalist and listen to this motherfucker. So that lasted for a couple of years. It was one of my go-tos. That I remember when I was 12, when the albums first came out, I bought Overnight Sensation, and the same day I bought Alice Cooper's School's Out.
Wow.
And if you know anything about Alice Cooper, you know that he and Bob Ezrin went crazy. That and $1 Billion Babies were also heavily arranged. Like he loved his orchestral stuff. So I was getting Frank, the last Frank Zappa album I bought at that time was The Grand Wazoo, which was a big band album. So 12-year-old Scott Thunes in 1972 was getting his mind expanded in ways that he didn't even plot. Like, my mom listened to music, but she wouldn't try and turn me on to jazz, and I wouldn't try and turn myself on to jazz. But here I am listening to Alice Cooper's amazing voice, these amazing arrangements and orchestration, great drumming, great bass playing. The arrangements are still super exciting. The Glenn Buxton and the other guitar player, just amazing guitar parts, everything. Mind blown, mind expanded. Yes. Then I went into prog rock, listening to Yes and ELP. And while I was doing that, this friend of ours came out and introduced fusion. So we were all expanding our musical horizons, and then Frank's fusion ears kind of melded into that. And then at one point, I stopped listening to him and went and did a bunch of other stuff, started playing punk music, new wave music here in the Bay Area. But my brother and we had a friend named Ed Berman who came out from the East Coast, who was a Pink Floyd, Frank Zappa, and Grateful Dead fan, Allman Brothers. He was actually at the concert where they yelled at Whipping Post. He brought all of this high energy with him, and one of the things he wanted to do was play in Frank Zappa's band. He loved Ainsley Dunbar, and that was his goal in life, was to somehow replace the Ainsley texture. Frank wasn't doing that anymore. But we went to go see Frank in 1980 at the Berkeley Community Theater, and Ed and Derek were like, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And I left a little nonplussed. I left a little, this isn't like the Mothers. This isn't like the early fusion stuff. It's a lot of notes, but it's very clean. I'm not feeling it. I came out 20-year-old Scott going, I've got other things going on. But Ed, who was tireless in trying to figure out his place in the ecosystem, he had transcribed the Black Page, the hardest piece of music of Frank, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And either got backstage and showed it to Frank, and Frank said, it's wrong. That's all the input you get. He somehow became friends with Steve Vai, and Steve was kind of like, yeah, here's my phone number, and, you're doing great, and all this kind of stuff. Ed came home and said, I met Steve Vai, and my brother went, oh, well, give me his phone number. I'm going to try and get into Frank's band. Somehow Ed found out that Frank had fired a group of musicians and was looking to hire people. So I wasn't about to call him. I didn't really need it. But my brother was desperate for, he was a really great musician. He almost got his BA in composition. He wrote for classical instruments. He wrote 2 string quartets for the Kronos Quartet. He was a smart guy, a lot of music in him, but he wanted to be a, rich and famous guitar player. And so he called up Steve, and Steve said, yeah, you can come down and hang out, but Frank doesn't really need a guitar player. So somehow he went down to Los Angeles and hung out with Arthur Barrow, who was one of Frank's bass players, and Steve Vai, and recorded with them, became kind of mini pals with them, stuff like that. Steve said, here's Frank's number, but he's already got guitar players. He's already got himself, Ray White, and myself. He doesn't need any other guitar players. He's going to say no. And Derek didn't care, which is really smart of him, but he calls up Frank and says, hi, my name is Derek. I play guitar. I really want to, see if I can audition. Frank said, I'm sorry, man. I just don't need a guitar player. What I'm looking for are drummers and bass players. I fired Vinny Coyoluta and Jeff Berlin. It's like, if I don't want to play with those guys, who am I going to end up with? And so my brother said, my brother plays bass. And Frank had 2 questions for him. He said, can you read? And he said, yeah, we both went to college in Marin, and we played in all the ensembles. And he's, we really enjoy reading music, and we love classical music, and we really love classical music and knew a lot about it. And then Frank said, is he fantastic? And how do you answer that? And Derek, to his credit, said, yeah, actually, he's fantastic. And Frank said, have him give me a call. So my brother calls me up and says, I just talked to Frank Zappa. And I said, no, you didn't. You're a fucking liar. That's the type of prank you would use on me. I don't have time for this shit. Get out of here. And he said, no. It gets worse. He wants you to call him. And I said, I hate you. You're not a good person. I'm hanging up now. He said, no, I'm absolutely serious. Here's his phone number. He wants to looking for a bass player. Call him up right now. Wow. So I was at my girlfriend's house in San Anselmo, and I, hung up with my brother and said, he just gave me Frank Zappa's phone number. What am I supposed to do? I said, well, we should probably call him. I said, I can't, I'm not going to call Frank Zappa. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. It would be one thing if I didn't know who he was, but I had grown up with him. He was one of my heroes. I knew how incredible We're Only in It for the Money is. There's nothing like it on the face of planet Earth. He's my permanent hero. I don't care if he's doing something I don't really like right now. It's like, I can't imagine going out on everything, all those things going into a 20-year-old person's mind. So I called him up. Frank answers the fucking phone. Frank Zappa. Wow. That's the way it is nowadays. Okay. Hi, my name's Scott Thunes. You just talked to my brother, Derek. He said, I should call you. You need a bass player. He said, yeah, can you read music? Tell me how much can you read? I said, I played in all the ensembles, played in jazz ensemble, played in all the choirs and stuff like that. I think my reading's pretty good. I don't know if I, be reading your music perfectly out the gate, but I absolutely use. And he said, are you fantastic? Like, fuck, are you kidding me? I can't, who would ever, what kind of a person? And I said, yeah, actually I am, because I actually have a thing that I don't see in any other musician. I really honestly don't. I've got a certain physical passion that exudes while I'm working, which of course the opposite side of that is if I'm absolutely miserable, you can fucking tell. You can fucking tell, and it's not a pleasant sight. Okay. But beyond all that stuff, I do believe that I have something that other musicians don't have. I don't know if you might think it's fantastic, but it was enough for me. So I said, yeah. He said, great. When can you come down? I said, I don't know. I got to work this weekend. He said, you can't come down tomorrow? I said, no, actually, I've got to work. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's it then. I said, I guess that's that. You don't want to see me on Monday? Holy shit. So I said, bye. And I hung up the phone. So that's really my claim to fame, is that I hung up the phone on Frank Zappa when he offered me an audition, and I couldn't go because I had to park cars. Now that might just seem funny on the face of it.
Fate intervened, I guess.
Well, actually, my girlfriend intervened because
Oh, okay.
she was the smarter of the two of us, and I said, I can't not work Ron Edwards, my PhD in philosophy, car park owning boss, would fillet me alive. I'm not, he's my Frank Zappa. He's currently my Frank Zappa. He's my guru. He's my mentor. He's just this incredibly brained guy. He had Satra's being in nothingness on his wall in the parking garage. He knows what life's about. He lives in North Beach. He's a North Beachian. I trust him with my life. I can't let him down. She says, you fucking call that guy and tell him that you are not working tomorrow night right now. And, she wasn't being mean about it. She was absolutely right. And so I called up Ron. I said, hey, Ron. I said, what do you want? I can you work tomorrow night or not? Ron, actually, it's very funny. I've got an audition with, I don't care. I said, no, it's Frank Zappa. He goes, I don't care. Can you work or not? I said, I've got to go to Los Angeles and audition with Frank Zappa. He said, your world is not my world. Can you work on Friday night or not? I said, no. And he goes, fine, goodbye. Obviously, he's going to go find somebody else. But that was, I'm not going to mess with my current Frank Zappa just so I can go off with another Frank Zappa. Yeah. So I called Frank back and I said, I got off work. He said, great. I asked my dad if I could borrow $100 for a plane ticket. He lent it to me, made me pay him back. And then I went down and auditioned, and I thought that was really fun. He said, that's great. I'll call you on Sunday. And so a week went by and I didn't hear anything. I was pretty sad about it. And next Sunday happens. And I was playing with my band with my brother, the Young Republicans. And we had a gig up in Calistoga, and we were all kind of hanging out at this local cafe in San Anselmo in Marin County, hanging out after the gig, having a good time. And my girlfriend drives home, and she immediately drives back and said, Frank Zappa called, because that was the only phone number I had had for us, was at her house. Frank Zappa called. He wants you to come down tomorrow. He wants you to call him. So the only phone that I had access to was the payphone downtown. And so me and 7 or 8 of my friends and people who had just come to this gig, we all trudged down to the city hall in San Anselmo. And I got on the payphone and asked Frank what was up. And he said, oh, I've got this girl. She's amazing. I think you're going to work really well with her. So you should get your butt down here immediately. So he told me I was going to audition with him again, or he's going to call me on Sunday. He never did. Apparently he had somebody else in mind. But then when he remembered how my audition went, and then Lisa Popeil, who had auditioned, he really wanted to see us in the same room. So I went down and we hung out and we had pizza and beer, and he was reading his story, Punch and Toot, and we all took rolls, and Lisa jumped on my back and we were just having a grand old time. And he said, oh, I got to see this on stage, right? So this, that, and the other thing happened. I got hired. But what happened at my original audition was that he wanted to hear me sing, and I didn't have a song to sing. I didn't really think about it, but I had been doing a song with the Young Republicans with my brother's band. We were doing Beatles, Rolling Stones, and some other hits that we liked. So we did a 999 song, which is a British punk band that I like. And some Buzzcocks. We did some Joe Jackson and cool. Police and stuff. But we did a Buzzcock song called Paradise, which is off of a different a different kind of tension album, the yellow one. It was the only song I knew. So I had to go to Tommy Mars, Frank's, jazz bow, but knew every other type of music on the face of the planet, keyboard player, and write the chords out for him. And so we played Paradise by the Buzzcocks. Where in the world are we? Everything's fake, nothing's real. I'm playing it here on my bass with Tommy Mars playing the Fender Rhodes. It was one of the weirdest experiences I think maybe Frank has ever had. It's just ridiculous because I don't know a real song. I only know this stupid song. That's the only thing I can remember the words for. If I could probably, audition something else, I would have never sung any kind of like song. I don't fucking know any. Right. But my claim to fame is my ear. I've got a really great ear. I've always had a really great ear, and it's always worked out well for me. So as long as I went to college and learned what I needed to do, this type of thing happens to me. So your intervals?
Yeah.
Okay. So I knew my intervals.
Yeah.
When Tommy Mars, Frank said, find out how good his ear is, and then went off and did something. And Tommy Mars said, okay, sing me this note, blah. And I went, la. And he said, okay, sing me a perfect fifth above this note, la. And I go, la. And he goes, okay, sing me a major seventh above this note, la. And I go, la. And he goes, okay, sing me a tritone below this note, la. And I go, la. Like, turn around and went, gave Frank the thumbs up. And that I passed Tommy's audition. So that was really good. And so, then I went down when he hired me again, I went down for a week and he had this bigger audition, which was for me to learn a bunch of his written music. And so he put me up in a hotel and that was a Monday. And he said, Thursday, you're going to come in and audition. So he gave me 4 days to kind of get my understanding of his music up. Sure. And I went in and auditioned on this piece of music called Mo and Herb's Vacation, which has an electric bass part that was cribbed from the bass clarinet part. Very classical with quintuplets going over ritardandos and with octave displacement, all that kind of stuff. And he had all three of us auditioning bass players do that in front of each other. He didn't even wait for one to move. Yeah, it was nasty. And then he had me do it while he conducted. Then he had me do it to his new drum machine, the Linn drum, Wendell. And then he had me do it while he conducted to an arrhythmic part. So that some drum part that he had was just doing something so I could be following him and not listening to the drums, but also listening to the drums. And so, wow, that worked out pretty well. So, I don't like to toot my own horn, but I literally passed a Frank Zappa audition.
Yeah,
I don't need to make anybody else happy ever musically. If you don't like what I'm doing, I've already got somebody that you should have seen what I had to do to get that fucking gig.
Yes.
It's all fun and games, water under the bridge, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's funny you mention, having something as a musician that no other musicians have, because there's more to it than just reading the notes on the page. There's imbuing those notes with some, whatever it is, whatever ephemeral quality it is that you bring to it. That
Frank doesn't give a shit about you reading the notes.
Yeah.
And I just read this in, there's an awesome Instagram channel, whatever.
Post
it's an account called Frank Zappa Vault, and they find cool pictures that really haven't been posted before, and the comments are always multi-paragraph interviews. Now all of those interviews are already on that AF whatever, that Frank Zappa fan site, whatever that is. So basically they're just taking interviews that have already been done, 70s, 80s, it doesn't matter. There's 1,000 things to choose from. It's really fun. And so one of these things that just got posted actually had that in it. I forgot what we were talking about. Remind me what you just last said.
Just adding something more to the music than just reading the notes off of the page.
Right. He said, reading music only helps so that I don't have to play it for you. He really, the quicker the better, but honestly, it didn't matter. He would, and he had, many musicians in his employ who don't read music, and he had to teach them on a note by note basis. It didn't really matter. That's part of his function as a band leader, is trying to get that information out. The better ear you have, the less work he has to do, because he can just say, go, which is what he did. As soon as I passed the audition, he handed us all stacks of records and he said, learn all this, I'll figure out what songs we want to do after I hear what you can or cannot do. I've kind of got an idea already, but if you can't do the songs that are on these records, then we're going to have problems. So basically reading music is just an information pipeline. And most of the music that we did wasn't hard, didn't have written music. But in 1982, he had the idea to play with this Polish orchestra, plan to play with this old Polish orchestra. And he has a large amount of music that is written in a modern classical style for rock band instruments. And so we spent weeks of our regular rehearsing for the tour also learning all this stuff that we never used. Yeah. So we were able to play it. He, got it good enough so that if we were to pop into the studio immediately afterwards, we would have gotten somewhere. But without those notes that are sitting around waiting for him, it's like, I hear it, here it's written out. Here I'm handing it to this bunch of musicians who are not just rock and rollers who can kick ass rock and roll, but can also read this music and take this information. I don't have to sit around like, that would be horrible, taking Mo and Herb's Vacation and trying to teach me on a note by note basis how to do that stuff on a guitar, because he can't play it. He never learned how to play it. So it's like, literally, if I can get it out onto that paper, then circuitously it'll come back to my musicians. And that's what he hoped. And that's what we were good at. Robert Martin, of course, massively trained conservatory trained musician. I am, for want of a better term, the conservatory of life. I've studied my scores. I love playing along with the scores. And so I'm a score reading guy. And that was just a technology that was exciting to me. Teaching rock band at high school, I am absolutely gobsmacked and surprised at the number of kids, the percentage of kids who don't give a flying fuck about reading music. It's extremely distressing.
I was going to ask you about teaching. That was one of my questions.
That's going to come. That's going to come in a second. But mostly, it's the concern that if I remember going to see Jaco Pastorius do a clinic at Studio Instrument Rentals in San Francisco with a bunch of our friends. The White Riots night, it's actually when the Moscone, Harvey Milk got killed and that whole thing that happened. The night those riots happened, we were driving down Van Ness and watching the phalanx of cops in riot gear going down. Wow. I was like, oh, we're going to go see a musician. See you guys later. And so we go down to see Jaco, and I asked him a stupid question, but basically one of the things he said, and he was kind of like preaching to the converted, we already knew, was, if you're not reading music, you're a selfish musician because you don't want to see what they have to say and you don't care about anybody else knowing your music. So really it's a philosophy. Reading music isn't just a thing or a technology or a tool. It's a philosophy. If you read music, the world is at your fucking fingertips. And anybody who doesn't want to do that is an incurious loser. That's just my philosophy. I don't really have anything to say to you if you can't do that. One of my big things is waiting for keyboard players to come into my area of music teaching, because so many of them can play crazy good jazz, classical. There's a kid who comes in here and plays all of these late romantic piano concertos from memory. But I put a very small piece of music in front of him and he could not read it. Literally has the ear of magical godhood, but can't read a piece of music. And most of these jazz bows, they can play, chords and this, that, cling, 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 but you put a piece of music in front of them that's Bartok from 1937 and their faces go blank. So I don't have my people. I'm not surrounded by my people, and sight reading isn't just a technology that impresses, it opens the world up to you. So that's kind of one of those philosophical things that I think about nonstop. I don't have to worry about that when I'm playing rock and roll. We're all kind of doing what we have to do to get the parts ready. I don't really give a shit if you read music or not. If you're a 50-year-old man, you've had your chance. But if you're a 15-year-old kid and you're in my class and you have no idea what the notes on your neck are, we're going to have a problem. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's like speaking another language, reading another language.
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could go that far, but I wasted my time learning, musical Italian.